Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Os damos la bienvenida a esta charla que claramente es uno de los highlights del día, como se puede observar. Just a question, this talk is going to be in English. Yep, so everybody can follow that. Solo voy a hacer una pequeña introducción de Anita Cooney, la decana de la Escuela de Diseño de Pratt, que tenemos la suerte de tenerla hoy aquí. And I'll switch to English now. Soy Edgar González, el director del grado de diseño del Instituto de Empresa, y estoy aquí para darle la réplica solamente. Yo no voy a hablar, yo solamente la introduzco y la voy a hablar. So let's switch to English. Yeah, Anita Cooney is the dean of the School of Design at Pratt Institute, and right now, all you might be wondering, what a North American institution is doing in an Ibérica Bienal Ibérica de Diseño. And this is one of the topics that we're going to discuss with Anita. She's going to explain us why. And very interesting because, as you know, Pratt Institute is one of the oldest schools in design in the world. So I think her perspective, especially when she talks about where the school is going forward, such an old institution, what the future path is going to be. And welcome, everybody. Welcome to Anita Cooney.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hello. I think I'm going to sit down so I can do the slides as well. And try not to talk too loudly into this. Why am I here? Well, one very important reason is Ignacio Urbino Polo, who's been part of the Biennale for its inception. But I would say more importantly, to me, this is very, very interesting because what I'm going to talk about today is how we think about design at Pratt and how we think about it recently and how we're trying to identify what it means to be a designer without just speaking to disciplinary boundaries. And so that's what we'll talk about today. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about Pratt. And I also have to get my notebook. It's going to be very old school. I'm going to look like I'm reading from notes, which I am. So I thought what I'd start with is something that may sound very simple and obvious, but it's the mission and vision of the School of Pratt, because even though it's one of those things that every school has to do, it's, I think, actually important and to me still speaks to the truth of what the school is all about. So forgive me for reading, but the mission of Pratt is to educate artists and creative professionals to be responsible contributors to society. And so to stop right there, that's key. And to me, that's what design is all about, to be a responsible contributor to society. Pratt seeks to instill in its graduates aesthetic judgment, professional knowledge, collaborative skills, and technical expertise. Again, all of those things I think are really critical. It's not just that we start the letter of the alphabet with A, so there's aesthetic judgment, but because it's really, really important, as well as the professional knowledge. Collaborative skills, all of us as a community, again, that means talking to all of you is not about difference, but about connection, and technical expertise, which we all know we all need. So we've always also had a firm grounding in liberal arts and sciences, truly believing that you need to understand the cultural context you are in, the history of the places and habits and patterns and culture you're from, and that without that understanding that comes from studying about the world you're in through other disciplines, through reading, through writing, and everything else that you might, math and science, you won't be able to participate in an intelligent way with your world. So, hold on. Gotta get to where I can. Okay. So, Pratt in the beginning. It was founded in 1887 by an American industrialist, Charles Pratt. He was. Can you hear me all well enough? But even if I'm moving around with the mic, okay. He was an advocate of education that had the power to transform lives of working people. His goal was an affordable education for those people, and it was one of the first schools in the country. Hold on, we have to get this correct. It's easier when I'm not holding it. to welcome students regardless of class, color, or gender. This is very, very big. In 1887, that was very unusual in the United States. Responding to the rapidly industrialized economy and the technical training it required, the school gave programs or certificates at the time in design and engineering, and were a lot of what they were about. So students became architects, engineers, dressmakers, and furniture makers. We're gonna get, we've got it now, let's try this. So here's what I would say. Pratt's always been a pragmatic as well as a provocative place. The Plan B, this is one of my favorite small stories that gets repeated all the time, which is that if, thank you. If Pratt wasn't going to succeed as a school, they were going to turn it into a shoe factory. So one way or another, they're gonna make it an operational environment. So it was either gonna work to train people to work in various industries, or it was going to become an industry, one or the other. And the motto of the school from the founder, Charles Pratt, was be true to your work and your work will be true to you. So, which allows me to think about, say one more thing I think is actually very important, which is that one of the truths about being Pratt is we are in a place called New York City, which is an incredibly dynamic, interesting, fabulous city, quite unlike many parts of the rest of the United States. Very international. Again, I would say, why am I here? That means, yes, I'm part of the United States, but yes, we are also, think of ourselves as a global culture. It can be a very local global culture, as in the world should come to New York, we don't have to go anywhere. But that's not really what I mean by that. I mean that it is a true mixing ground. And what it is, why it's such an incredible place to study is and what we've used it to great advantage, it is think of the city as a rich laboratory for all of our efforts. It's a way to test out and experiment and to find incredible resources. So we're incredibly grateful and lucky and live off that energy of the place. So a few pictures just of Pratt in the beginning, and to go back to those first ideas. The pragmatics of technology, they were important then, they are important now. And the power of observation, so very early drawing class. Again, this is 1887 or so, 88, 89, maybe even 1902. But you can see men and women in the drawing class together. I think that's part of the interesting difference about Pratt. And that it was hands-on, whether it was clay or at the cutting with the saw. And this one to me is an amusing one. On the women are picture of Pratt design of automotive design in the 50s. The men on the right are working on a big clay model in the 60s. Those women who started studying automotive design at Pratt in the 50s often went on, GM is known, General Motors in Detroit, had a significant number of women who studied at Pratt went on to become designers at General Motors. And so this legacy of women in design and in unexpected places in design has been long-standing. And given that we were talking about the Bauhaus a lot this week, and because of the 100-year anniversary, I think this is a reference. Some of you may know the elements of design. I know it's been translated into Portuguese and circulates in some schools in Brazil, and perhaps in Portugal, I'm not sure. But this is what I would call legacy curriculum at Pratt. The two people here, Rowena Reed and Alexander Costello, they were fundamental in the beginning of the industrial design program at Pratt, and they also developed a series of exercises. There's a debate about whether they were based on the Bauhaus or their own exercises. They're very comparable to Bauhaus exercises. They are where they are making sure that aesthetics, composition, and form are as critical as solving problems. And they are still used today. and anybody who has studied at this curriculum feels like it's been the defining difference in their experience. So to me, this is a nod to how we interpret the Bauhaus in one way at Pratt, since that seemed to be a subtext of this week. So in 2014, the School of Art and Design at Pratt split into a School of Art and a School of Design, and I have had the opportunity and the pleasure of being the advocate for students and faculty in communications design, fashion design, industrial design, and interior design since then. I've also had the challenge with all of those students and faculty to try and become a culture that is a School of Design. So as soon as I got the job, 5 minutes in, people said, so what does it mean to be a School of Design? I said, I don't know, haven't been one. We've been departments, we have been programs, we've been a strong institution, but what does it mean to be a School of Design? We're about to figure that out together. And how do you do that with people who don't necessarily know if that's a good idea for them? That's been part of what our challenge has been. And I would say, so a little over 5 years later, and in working with faculty and students, but really with the faculty and the chairs, thinking that what we're talking about is design without borders. Design, give me 1 second, I want to refer back to my notes. And it's inspired by an idea that the Nobel Prize winner economist Herbert Simon said. He wrote in 1969, "Design is devising courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones." So these courses of actions can be addressed through the design of objects, dresses, messages, printed matter, and space. We do this work, take on important existing situations that need attention, such as healthcare, immigration policy, climate change, across and within our disciplinary boundaries. Change is the operative frame of mind. It's the aspirational, but it's also attentive to the reality of we're in right now and the enormous challenges we face. So as such, we've been defining this design without borders as a series of flows rather than points of view, and there are 5 of them. I'm going to just list them, and then I'm going to talk about them by showing you some student work. So they are connect, enable, sustain, empower, and humanize. So you could be debating the work I'll show whether it fits into one of these categories or it could fit into more than one. But this is the way we're looking for connections, literally connect across our disciplinary boundaries, connect to the world we want to impact, and connect to each other. So after all that connection, I'll go to the obvious one, connect. So design that facilitates exchange, communication, and community building. It's design that needs to be responsible to multi-actor contexts, enable connective and communicative affordances is really the operative idea for the projects I'm about to show you. First one is the creative exchange, Pratt Creative Exchange. We proposed working with a foundation called Mad Workshop out of LA, that we wanted to test how to reinvigorate a small town through design. And that design, not that we would come in and we'd change the place, but that through design we could be an agent for social enterprise and education. And so what we did, we picked a town not too far away, but had been a former, there's many, many towns like this in New York and all in the Northeast and the Midwest. A lot of the country, in fact, smaller towns that had their manufacturing moment of importance and are doing well, but need more energy. Kingston was important because it was also a town that had a certain degree of activity and life and even creative, I would call it a little bit of a creative economy that actually proved to be quite important in our efforts. So we picked the town, found a place, designed a space. What you see here is a space that was converted by the students. There were students in industrial design, interior design, and communication design working together with faculty from those 3 disciplines, as well as someone from social sciences. And we designed the furniture, designed the place to make it to be a lab, a workshop, a place to test out ideas. And here you see students, high school students, at the school. The first 6 months we spent picking the place, building out the space, developing some products that I'll show you, which was an idea of through design. We designed the space, but through design where we wanted to present the history of the town to its citizens. And there are many, many former brick factories there, and we actually took the brick dust and made new objects with that. The real important part to me about this project, and why I'm showing it to you first, is that what we really did that I think was impactful was, those are the objects. No, let's go back. Here's the students, is that we then did an internship with students in high school who, and taught them principles of design, but even more importantly, introduced them to other manufacturers in the town, a woodworker who works with reclaimed wood, the ceramicist, a weaver, a number of different people. So they got to know the students. Most of the students in the high school, the public high school, many of them are immigrants from other parts of the world. They know the people they know. They don't necessarily know any of these other people. We were making, through design, through this program, in the space I've shown you, we were making connections between the high school students and other people in their community. What it did for them was it sparked for them interest in ideas about what they might want to do. And this might sound like it's miracle in a sort of cinematic way, but there was students who didn't know what they wanted to do. One young woman who thought she wanted to be a cop. That was what everybody in her family was. They were in the police force through this experience, and then coming to the design week in New York in May. She's decided that's what she thinks she wants to do, is go to school to study design. So what we're doing is exposing other people to the creative power of design, and people who might not understand that this was an option they would have. To me, that's really, really important. That is design across a critical boundary of knowing or not knowing. So those are a few of the small samples of porcelain that were made using the brick dust. The bricks you can see. So it was literally the dust from the bricks, former old bricks. Here's another idea, I would say, of how design can take on community. This was a student, the seniors at Pratt in Fashion create collections. She came from a family where the women the long tradition of women quilting, and it's a community building gesture, and she literally took that on as component of her collection, and invited all the women in her family and the women from her school to participate in a quilting bee to make parts for her final collection. So it's the act of the making that was the communicative part. This is, I could not put this in here. This is Ignacio with some of our students, with our friends at Eastie, who might be in the audience, I don't know, working. Ignacio can tell you he's the expert on this project, but they worked together in Havana on a project of sort of literally working together in space, and then coming back and working in New York and looking at design in an everyday way. And these are to rethink or to provide another alternative to a food cart in Havana that could be easily made from parts that were available that could collapse and store in an apartment building. So it was an exchange across boundaries of all kinds. And then this is another student project, student who wanted to address transportation, challenge of transporting, medicine into small towns in Africa. And so she had the fortitude, privilege, and opportunity to actually go and do some field research. I wouldn't say that was done by us. That was really on her own steam. and then developed an idea of a transportation system that really, a very simple idea that this is medicine for malaria in these boxes that can be wrapped around and carried on the bicycle, much more quantity than might typically be understood. And the strap that wraps them all together and holds them together also is a way to keep track of which medicines have been left in which towns at what date. So it is both the physical container boundary, but it also is the record. And to me, it's a pretty brilliant, elegant, low impact, low material use strategy. We've also had an ongoing project with, again, community neighbors, Brooklyn Art Museum, and we've done furniture for them. This is an example of a piece that's for their educational center with a young man. It's a soundboard that they can play with, and we did a series of benches for a public waiting space that they put in there for 3 months, but lasted much, much longer because everybody loved them. Again, these are scenarios where opportunities with other community members inspires us to make things in particular ways. Two very different strategies. The fashion collection here is a young woman who was, this is when all the challenges of immigrations and DACA students in the cities and colleges in the United States were being very, very anxious and uncomfortable when this is first unrolling. It's still not in a good situation right now. But she was, she's from the Caribbean. She was anxious about this, but more so she was really trying to figure out two things. She wanted to embrace her own culture in the design and the shape and the form of her and patterning of her collection, but so perturbed by the political reality for immigrants, the stripes on that clothing are, this is the part that to me is the most amazing. She took, she laser cut stripes with the names of all the countries that people are not allowed to come into the United States from. So the stripes just look like stripes. They read sort of like pinstripes, but in fact, they have this subtle message. The other one on the right-hand side, forgive it for liking blue and white to blue and white, but it's also an exchange between a communication design student in New York and a student in the Netherlands going back and forth. They put up a public posting. They collect, it was an interactive site, and they were getting people's response to things they were putting up there. And this is really all the negative press they got, and they sort of made a poster about it. So again, it's even the artifact might be aesthetic or curious, but it's really about the exchange that I think is why this is important. And one very obvious and simple, it's a give and take kind of scenario, that inviting people to leave things and give things as a trading situation. The students did this for a number of weeks and recorded what people kept, people took. They even put money out there to see if people would leave things for money and give money, or simply just take the money. And finally, a project of reimagining one of the busiest and most complicated, as in really not well to navigate subway stations on 14th Street, and it's Union Square subway station. It's multi-layered, and this student imagined that it could be a place for a language education center with, so that you could exchange, learn other languages, what you hear in the subway, while you're waiting for the trains. Next idea, enable, designs that expand our physical and mental abilities. These are really things that you can think of it as body prosthetics, or things that expand and supplement when we have needs or we are not as fully able as we'd like. So we did a series of projects with an organization that deals with Alzheimer's in New York City. And then this is an example of that project was part of an exhibit at the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum in New York, and called Access and Ability. I'm going to show you a few of these projects. Again, this is a walker that's also a garden, so we can go with the patient to outside when they go outside. If you would literally, you could imagine you could go and go from in to out, bringing, working the garden there, working the garden back. If people, all of these solutions are meant to both help the patients and their caretakers and their families. And the students looked and dealt, they each were given a family, a caretaker to work with directly, to understand and to think about how to develop these projects. This is an idea, again, if you have Alzheimer's, knives can be a dangerous thing if you're at particular stages of Alzheimer's. So this student designed a drawer insert, so in a typical deep drawer, the knives are hidden. If they're out of sight, it's out of mind, it's literally out of mind. And so the person who's the caretaker knows where the knives are. The person with Alzheimer's, we need not worry about them so much. This is another one, touch is one of the last sensations to really be effective, or to still work for someone with Alzheimer's, and so this is a chair that literally gives them a hug. For some others, at another stage of life or another issue, this would be a terrible idea. But for many Alzheimer's patients, this is exactly the right idea. There's another subtle one, and I think this one to me is brilliant because it's a few dots of Braille, but for me, a sighted person, I can't tell which one is Coke, which is ginger ale, and which is Pepsi. But if you're blind and you can read Braille, you can. And so to me, it's a provocative and interesting way to rethink what it means to be abled. This is an idea for public restrooms that are with warm tiles, warm protruding tiles that one can reach and touch. This is a female student imagining these for women's restrooms, for when you just want comfort, relief, stress, or even dealing with aching, menstrual crampy achiness. So there's cerebral palsy disability fundraiser every year. We've been working with them. They do various fundraising events, and this one was a fashion show, and one of our students actually worked directly with the individuals you see here in designing collections for them. And finally, these are two, perhaps slightly thinking more in body prosthetics, and the one is a cyborg idea, is a student who literally wore this machine that would keep track of her motions and her proximity to everybody else, to sort of see what it might feel like to be a cyborg and to get data all the time from your body parts. So she was pretending that's what she was doing. The other is taking advantage of a whole knit machine where you can actually program where the elastic wires are to insert bands, because she actually had this problem, and so she was solving a problem she knew very well, having to wear a brace and wanting to have a brace that's not quite so obvious. These next projects are, again, one more from the Alzheimer's studies. The people who at that stage of life very often don't want to go take a bath, but they'd be willing to take the shampoo that goes along with this shaggy dog. Is actually, it's shampoo, but it looks like dirt, so the dog gets dirty, and someone will be willing to take the dog for a bath. So these are really in the how you can enable through furry friends. The one on the right is a student who is exploring robots and sort of deciding that really robots should be pets. And finally, some fashion students who did a collective weaving project and were, again, embracing the idea of what does it mean to wear fur. Sustain. This one is going to be an obvious idea across boundaries and borders. Climate change is not about any borders. It's about, or any limits. It's affecting us all. So the first project here, we did a project with the government, who is asking us to help address waste, the waste from takeout food and to design packages that would be marine friendly, and as opposed to the plastic that ends up in the ocean. And what you're seeing here, I'm sorry, I should explain this, is we had to do an installation in Times Square. Again, May, there's a design week in New York City, and part of our charge when we took on this project was that the state government wanted to make sure that we brought this to the public in a really big way. Part of the design week in May is a series of installations in Times Square. There's no better place to actually, I can think of in New York, to showcase design to the public, because what happens in Design Week, which happens in many design weeks around the world, is the people who go are people who are interested in design. But Times Square is not a design public. It's everybody. It's tourists. It's everybody coming to the city. So this one was actually incredibly successful because these small panels had facts about the ocean, about plastics, and then had the samples you can see in the bubbles are the student projects. So it was an interesting way for us to also design a sustainable installation that would last for a couple of weeks outdoors and to get the message across. These are a couple of examples. I'm sorry, they look very light to me. I hope you can see them. Thinking of a biopolymer for straws that would work well with both as hot and cold, knowing that straws are a huge problem. Paper is not satisfying and it falls apart too fast. Metals also not satisfying. So could we find a plastic that had the right feel in the mouth and would degrade appropriately and withstand hot and cold? That was the idea. The small little triangle piece was an idea that you could actually have one shape, and at the three corners, the apexes of each of the triangle, one operates like a spoon, one a fork, and the other a knife. I think it's a little clumsy, but brilliant to sort of say, instead of all the utensils, the plastic utensils, or that you could just have this one little piece that was given. And finally, two students who sort of said, well, I don't know why we need any utensils. Just make the box for the food as to also be the utensils and be the serving tray all in one. This is an idea, again, a bike sharing program. We know that people, cities have them all over the world. In New York, most of the time the people who are on the bike shares do not bring a helmet with them. Why would you carry a helmet? So the student said about designing a helmet that would collapse and that could be cheap to make and could be recyclable. And so that when you pick up a bike, you could pick up a helmet and you could return the helmet. She actually won the Dyson Award for that helmet. There she is with James Dyson. It's a honeycombed corrugated cardboard helmet. This is, again, sustainable. This is not a new idea for anybody in this room, but I think it's an interesting one to show. There is a sportswear company in the United States called 47. They do a lot of T-shirts, sweatshirts, things like that, a lot of times for colleges. They gave us a bunch of dead stock, the stuff that hadn't sold, and said, please remake it in a different way. And so these are actually second-year students taking dead stock and making new clothing with it. Again, like biopolymers for the straws. This is a student a couple of years ago, graduate student in industrial design, working to develop algae as a knit, to make an algae knit, and then to make that as a proposal for the sole of the sneaker. Instead of the Eva foam, that the sole would actually degrade as well. So it's algae knit and algae kick. And finally, are you okay? This is a project about certainly in the United States, in a lot of Western cultures, when someone dies, we have very strict rules about how they can be returned to the ground, and if they're going to be buried, we basically make them not biodegradable. And so this is a student who proposed we should be part of the biodegradable strategy. And so she developed an idea of a knitted rope enclosure that will degrade. It's also embedded with spores that will grow a fungus, which will help accelerate the decomposition and move the process forward. Her proposal is also in that, what about the marker? How do we know where the body was? Plant a tree. Empower. Again, this is about social agency, political agency, design that promotes equality, inclusiveness, and free movement of people. This is a project from 2 students in graphic design in their senior year. They decided, this was a little after Me Too movement was happening in the United States, that they were missing pages in their history, in their experience, in their studies so far. And what were they missing? They were missing the lessons of more of the women graphic designers. They wanted them. So they wrote themselves a manifesto. They made a book of the content that they thought they went and found that they wanted everybody to know about. They invaded the space of the school. Where they made a long list of names that were missing. They set up an exhibit reading room. And finally they did this, and I think the thing that was so amazing to me about it all was they invited 5 women important in graphic design in New York City and area. Ellen Lupton it up there. They literally picked one in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and they invited them to stage and they interviewed them. And this is all what they did as this was their senior project, is they took this on and said, we need to rewrite our own story as students. And as about to become women in graphic design, we want to know how to do this. At the same time, there was a woman in industrial design who was also wanting to address gender and design and came up with a project called Parity Pockets, which was all about the fact that, and if you look at jeans, this is very true. So if she first started looking at them, that the pockets on the jeans on the front for women are much shorter than they are for men. Men can put their wallets in their pants, their phone, their keys. Women cannot. Not considered attractive to have those bulges. So she wanted to create parity pockets. And I would say this is more of a political gesture than an actual, here's what to do, but she literally did this, that you could order online and you can get an iron-on pocket extender. And she's got a website and she keeps track of responsible designers thinking about pockets for women. And again, it's design as provocation. Another idea of design as provocation, did a series of work thinking about undocumented immigrants in the United States. And this was looking at farmers and farms and recognizing that up to 60% of the people working on farms today are undocumented immigrants. And this student thought, well, how can we make the world understand this and not forget this fact? World in I'd say in the United States. And what she recognized is that every bit of fruit, every container has stickers on it. You get 5 avocados, you have 5 stickers on each avocado. Why not start just stickering them more? So if there's stickers that got put on surreptitiously in a guerrilla style, even this says farmers best undocumented labor. So it's a simple strategy. Another one looking at farmers and recognizing that even with approved pesticides, repeated use can really damage you. And these are gloves that have a treatment on the outer layer that switches color to let you know that you're actually getting too exposed over extended use to particularly toxic materials in those pesticides. And finally, this is a graphic design student taking on the idea of parity rule that 20% of causes have of 20% of the people's causes have impact on 80% of us, the rest of the world. I'm sorry for screwing up the math, but again, you might say that these things don't have anything to do with each other, but to me they all do, because what everybody's doing here is trying to sort of point out power differences in the language of design that they know. And they are trying to shift dynamics. This is another one that I think is actually really kind of profound. Current law in the United States is if you're born, you have to be documented that you were actually born in the United States in order to be considered eligible for citizenry. If you were delivered by a midwife, not a doctor, they won't take that certificate from them anymore because they're not a doctor. So what this student recognized is everybody, no matter midwife, doc, in a hospital, there's always an umbilical cord that has to get cut. So this is the piece that cuts it, but also designed as the blue piece will to lock in GPS coordinates where that birth happened, as well as some tiny bit of DNA to be able to then go to court and say, yes, I have proof. Yes, he wasn't a doctor, but we have proof. There are a lot of illegal immigrants who have babies who do, and not necessarily going to the hospitals for obvious reasons, but there are midwives all around the world. And it's so, this is, to me, a particularly important strategy. Finally, this is a student's imagination of how to take the office, an open office plan, and say it's not just yours, it's also ours for the employees. And so that and by imagining a ceiling-scape that hides all of the ductwork and the lights and everything, and recognize that there's surveillance cameras everywhere, wanting to figure out how to subvert those. So the idea is that at night, at day this is an office, and by night it's a speakeasy, it's a club. And that if you can tell, it's a little hard to see in here, but in this section drawing, there's a lot of cameras. She's imagining there's a lot of cameras because there are cameras everywhere these days in our culture, and that she could mask them, and that's what to allow the liberation to happen at night. So to take over the space. It's a dreamed project, but it's a good one. Human eyes, designs that offer civil solutions for improving the quality of life. These are, I'm going to end with these. These are, I think, what I would be, in some sense, to understand, kind of like the Braille example. The smallest of gestures can change everything. The smallest of design changes. So, a light designed to fit in the end of a handlebar and to turn on so that you can turn on for turning lights on your bike, making biking just a little safer. A hole in the cup of a city park bench that you can put your hole for a cup. Just the hole. That's the design. Take something away. This one is a vertical bay window, if you can understand that. Thinking about, again, driven by the urban reality. What if if I open up the window, I stick my head out, I can get more light and I feel the air. Why can't I just make the window open that way? And so this is a designer. Actually, she's from Argentina. She studied architecture first. She came and studied industrial design. This is her beautiful proposal for life in the city. Another student in interior design, and sort of taking, again, the limits of a city apartment dwelling and saying, if I can just rethink the spatial, perceptual qualities of the space using light, and distorting them, that will make a difference. And her whole effort was all about the studies of light and its impact from the windows into the reflected and artificial light. Finally, a few others, just packaging design students, crush and brush so that toothbrush does not look like a toothbrush, toothpaste does not look like toothpaste, but the brush works just like those snap bracelets, and you can brush your teeth and you chew the tablet to get the cleaner. Student taking on the feminine products should not be embarrassing, so let's not make the design of the packaging that way. So you need to just embrace the embarrassment. And we did a funny sponsored project with a vinyl company. And this student sort of said, okay, I'm going to design vinyl stickers for kids' toys and make them like Band-Aids. It's very simple, but it's got appeal. And this one is back to the, I'm about to end. So back to the immigrants and the ICE, the immigration police officials wear ICE badges. So they're metal badges. They're scary. You don't want to talk to someone from ICE. And some of their tactics are very surreptitious. They pretend to be doing something else and then they're there. So this student took on the idea of this very scary idea of these people who could literally put you in detention and send you away, and took the badge, the literal badge, and made it just like the badge, just the same size, but turned it into a lollipop. Again, it's a humorous strategy to confront a very, very scary reality. And I'm going to end on an even lighter note, which is we did a project called Pulse, the Pratt United Legworks Sock Exchange, and they were a sock company, and it was early on in the beginning of the School of Design, and I sort of said, let's lowest simple design problem, design a sock. Just have it relate somehow to the design, something about the School of Design. What are we as a community? The one that was selected to be manufactured, which we gave away, we did not sell them, we gave them away, is the one with the X-Acto blades. Because I thought the X-Acto blade is a perfect symbol for anybody in design. One needs to cut out, extract, separate. And there you have it. Conclusion, I'd like to say, to me, this idea of thinking through the approach to your design and the strategy of design, whatever the discipline, I think the thing that unifies all of them is that to me, students of design are fundamentally optimists who want to change the world, who care about aesthetics and want to somehow combine these two things. And this is so that these ideas of connection are more important than which method or material or approach you take. Thank you. Do we have questions?
Thank you very much, Anita. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. So, yes. Yeah, I don't know, they told me, I don't know, you're the boss. He's on Manuel. Okay. Okay, let's take one question. One quick, interesting question. No pressure. Yes? Who was? Somebody? We have the opportunity to have some questions here. No? Okay, we leave it here. I keep with this idea of these designers being optimistic, applying these connects, enable, sustain, humanize, and empower as improving the quality of life, which I think is the message we can take away with us. Yeah. Thank you very much, Anita, for being with us today. Thank you.
It's all right. Thank you very much for the conference. Has been very inspiring, actually. I was wondering about the design without borders. That was the topic of the conference, of course. And the borders that we are still remaining in our design schools, where we are all the time separating like the 4 different kind of designs. So, well, that was the question. Let's see.
So, we still teach within those disciplines, and within those boundaries. And the courses that are required for a graphic design are different than, they have some shared courses than, say, an industrial designer. We still do that. We are trying to do more and more projects across the disciplines. But this is also why I'm presenting this idea, is that if everybody starts to recognize their work with commonalities of agendas, they will begin to talk to each other in a more meaningful way. And so that if we can share that idea, then you can see, even though you might not be in the classes together, you can see that you can start to talk to each other and understand where there are things that you explore that are similar. So to me, that's very, very important. On the other level, there are all the agendas I wanted you to make to break down those disciplinary boundaries, but make sure that students walk away with the expertise they need to go out and succeed, to work, whether it's working for someone else, to work for themselves. So, and sometimes those are opportunities like literally working in teams across the disciplinary boundaries, or going to another place and learning. And then we are doing things, I'm going to say something that might seem funny. We have fashion, but we do not have textile design. Textiles transgresses across many disciplines. Graphic designers, some of them want to put their work on soft material. Interior designers, architects think about soft material. Fashion is all about it. Industrial designers, the same. And we are developing more of getting new machines and equipment and strategies to use textiles as a way to connect. So literally the thread is going to connect. And that's a loose idea, but it's an important one.
Thank you very much. Thanks.